Hey guys, welcome back to Red Bear's Garage. And a couple months ago, we got a message on Instagram from Ronnie Renner. So if you ever watch motocross or been in the motocross world, you know the name. Here's a highlight reel of Ronnie.
The 11th attempt. Again! Wow.
Now, Ronnie's been in the motocross world for over 20 years, but here lately, him and his friends have made a backyard go-kart track, and they've been racing competitively, and Ronnie don't like to lose. And Ronnie's been using a stock Ghost Predator from Harbor Freight, and that's his problem. His friends got built-up engines, so he contacted me and asked me if I would like to build an engine for him, and that's exactly what we have on the table here. Now, there is only one rule in their races, and you have to use a Harbor Freight engine, a Predator. So if you're going to use a Harbor Freight engine, the best one to use is the Ghost. You do pay a little bit of premium price because of the race cart, purebred that's in it, but overall it's a better block to start with. Of course, that's all we're going to be using because EC sent us a full stroker kit for this engine. So Ronnie hopefully won't be losing to his friends anymore because, again, he said he don't like to lose, and he's been losing. So hopefully we can help that. So what we're going to do is, of course, put a billet flywheel that has a little bit more timing in it. We're going to use EC's all-new Reaper cam. We talked about this in a couple videos in the past where we've been doing stage 4. And this is basically going to be a stage 4, even further stroked out Ghost. We did a stroker Ghost a while back and sent it over to Silas. His channel is linked in the video description. And this is going even further than that. So this will be a 227cc stroker Ghost. How we're going to do that is use a 59mm crank instead of the 58mm. And since we're going with that all-new Reaper cam, we're going to be putting an even better flowing head on it. So this is a WC head from EC. It has large stainless steel valves, 26-pound valve springs, aluminum retainers. It uses stock valve train, so it's reliable and easy on the whole valve train setup, and it's CNC ported. And that's very important because it's precisely ported, and it's going to flow very well with that cam and with the carb that we got matched up, which is a PWK 24. And this is the carb that has the manifold that bolts it right to the head, so Ronnie don't have to worry about knocking his carb off if it's a bumpy track. And of course, with that stroker kit, we're going to have a forged rod and a flat top piston. I don't think I'm forgetting anything. All the specs and all the parts are linked in the video description, so check those out if you're interested in any of these parts to stroke out your Ghost. So we're going to show you how to throw all these parts in a Ghost, and we're going to throw it on our dyno and see what kind of power it makes. We're expecting some good torque out of this engine, and that's what Ronnie's going to need when he's coming out of the curves or out of the turns to get back down the straightaway. So hopefully he ain't losing no more and he makes his friends feel like crap. So let's get this thing built on the dyno, and we'll throw it on the mini bike to see what kind of power it makes.
First off, we got to strip down this Ghost to bare block. We're not going to be using any of these stock parts other than the block. Once the carb is removed, I can take off the fan cover, coil, heat shield, and the flywheel. Replace the nut on the crankshaft and use a pry bar to pry out on the flywheel while hitting the nut with a hammer to remove the flywheel. Now we can remove the valve cover, rocker pin retainer, rockers, push rods, lash cap, and unbolt the head. Remove the side cover to pull out the cam, lifters, unbolt the rod, and remove the rotating assembly. First thing I do on a new block is I drill out the drain hole in between the cam lifters. This will allow oil to flow back down from the head and keep it from building up in your valve cover. I use a 3/8 drill bit for this hole. Now I need to check the ring gap before installing the rotating assembly. Slide a ring into the block and square into the cylinder with the piston. You need to make sure the gap is within spec with a feeler gauge. If it is too tight, we'll need to grind the piston ring with a piston ring grinder, and if it's too loose, you'll need a new set of rings. Ours is right in spec at 12 thousandths of an inch for the top ring and 13 thousandths of an inch for the second ring. With our ring gap checked, we can now assemble our piston. Start with the oil ring spacer. Then an oil scraper ring on top and bottom of this spacer. These are the thinner rings in the kit. Next is the compression rings. The black is installed first in the center of the piston and the chrome ring on the top groove. Make sure any numbers or letters are facing up when you install these rings. Make sure to orientate the gaps in the rings 120 degrees apart. Install one of the wrist pin clips into the side of the piston. When installing the rod, make sure the long ear of the rod is on the arrow side of the piston. Use assembly lube on the wrist pin hole and install the wrist pin in the opposite side than the clip you installed. Line up the rod and slide the pin through. Now you can install the remaining wrist pin clip. Use assembly lube on the crank and install in the block. Make sure you check your oil clearances on your new rod with the crank. Ours checks out right in spec, so we're good to proceed. Lube the piston and cylinder walls and use a ring compressor to install the piston in the block with the arrow facing down. Line up the rod on the crank and install the rod cap. Oil the rod bolts before you install them and make sure to evenly snug them. Now we can torque down the rod bolts by starting at 60 inch-pounds and going up 15 inch-pound increments while alternating from bolt to bolt until we reach 150 inch-pounds. Oil the lifters and slide them into the block. Now we can oil the cam and install it in the block and make sure to line up the dot that's on the crank gear as well as the cam gear to make sure it's in time. We can now install the crank cover and torque to 20 foot-pounds. Install the head studs by backing 2 nuts together to drive the stud into the block. We can install our dowels and a new head gasket, followed by the head. With the studs we have a washer, and then the nut goes on and we can torque them to 20 foot-pounds. Install the push rods and set the valve lash. Tighten the adjuster nut snug on the feeler gauge while the engine is at top dead center. Tighten the lock nut and recheck. I have found that you need it to be a little bit loose on the adjuster because it'll tighten a bit once you lock down the lock nut. You'll notice when I spin over the engine, the exhaust valve opens, followed by the intake, followed by the compression release cycle. Make sure you pass the compression release when setting valve lash in their top dead center. We'll also be using an EC billet valve cover with an O-ring oil seal. Now we can install our billet flywheel and torque it to 65 foot-pounds.
So don't make a mistake like I did and put the flywheel on before you put this back shroud on. There's no way to get to the bolt with the flywheel on. So unfortunately, I have to pull the flywheel just to get to that stupid bolt on this side cover. I always forget about that, even though I built hundreds of these engines.
Install the coil and set the lash to 45 thousandths of an inch. I place the feeler gauge in between the coil and flywheel and push the coil into the flywheel and tighten it down. Once it's tight, you can rotate the flywheel to expel the feeler gauges. Now we can install the heat shields and the flywheel cover. The last part is using AMSOIL braking oil. I'll run this on a mini bike for about 30 minutes at 40% throttle under a low before changing it to the Dominator racing oil. The oil is all changed up. I'm gonna go lean on it a little bit and then put it on the dyno. Is stretched quite a bit. So if it had a tighter belt on it, it would have done a lot better. It's about to storm by the way. Yeah, this thing is going to be mean on a dirt track car. Woo. She's a ripper for sure. Driveway pull. Yeah, that belt is the one I rode at the meetup, so it's worn out. Good Lord. Freaking ripped, dude. Trails are getting pretty rough. Run the mower through here. This thing is bigger than me. I'm excited to see what this thing will do on the dyno. Alrighty guys, so we got a pretty good jump over stock power, of course, with this 227. Now we're going to look at first the numbers over the we're going to look at the numbers of the 223cc that we built. That was a Super Ghost we first built and sent to Silas. Stock, the Ghost makes 9.9 horsepower and it made 11.61 foot-pounds of torque. Right out of the box, that's what you're going to see with the Ghost. So when we did the 223 kit, it jumped up to 16.31 horsepower. That was a 64% increase in horsepower with the 223 kit. And then we jumped up to 13.64, which was a 17.5 gain in torque. Now, torque is what's hard to get out of these engines. You can get a lot of horsepower, but torque is really what we care about at the end of the day, because, you know, horsepower is just a number that's based off of torque anyways. So that's still some really good numbers though. And then when we jumped up to the 227 build, we got over stock 69%. Now that's in gain, and that's 3% over the 223. And then we got 24% over stock in torque, and that was 5.5% over the 223. And there's not a lot of differences between the 223 and 227. In parts, you're going to be installing the parts the exact same way. So if I had to go, someone was going to build it, I would definitely go for the 227 kit. So we ended up with 16.76 horsepower and 14.39 foot-pounds of torque. Now 15 is a number that's not super hard to get in torque out of these engines, but to get over 15 or 16, you're going to start spending a lot of money. I really think the cap's like 17, 18 on these engines, unless you're doing something crazy all-out race build. It's not going to have a ton of drivability and last super long. And then in horsepower, you've seen us get 20, 21 out of Lonnie's engine, which we're actually about to make more horsepower with that engine, but 24, 25 is probably your max in one of these engines. Definitely, you would never hit that with this particular build. You'd have to go up to something even crazier. But that's really going to be your cap. You're going to be spending a ton of money to get more torque over 15, 16 foot-pounds, and a lot of money over 20 horsepower. You're going to be dumping some money for sure. But this should be a really massive gain, because he's running his Ghost now completely stock, just like it comes out of the box. And his buddy's got, I don't know what all's done to his engine, but he's definitely getting spanked. You can hear the difference if you watch the videos. Now, we have linked their race videos, one of them, in the video description. I couldn't include any of that content because they put music over it, and I don't know if it's royalty free with YouTube. I pay for my music that I use, and you know, I don't know if they're paying, and I don't have the license for that. So that's why we didn't include any of their footage. But Ronnie, I hope this helped you to beat your friends and really get on the winner bracket for sure. It's going to be a massive increase when you're coming out of the turns. Like, if you look at our graphs when we put them up on screen, look at the left hand side of the screen, and it'll break it down all throughout the RPMs of what horsepower and torque it made. So if you look at that, it's coming, the torque's coming in hard around 4,500 or so, and then just carrying it on through. So when he comes out of the turn, he's going to really be able to pull hard in the little straightaway. Now, their dirt tracks are very, very small. It's about like the size of one of the Cars and Cameras that we went and raced back in the day. And it should make a massive difference having this engine. I mean, of course, you're looking at 69% gain in horsepower than what you got right now, and then 24% over torque. So thank you guys so much for watching. Let us know what you think about this 227 Super Ghost. We got a lot of stuff like the Stage 4 240 coming. We got 2 separate videos on it, and then we have Lonnie's billet head engine. We did an all new rebuild on it and kind of a revamp, and I think it's going to make the most horsepower we've seen on our dyno. So I can't wait to do that. We got a lot of testing videos coming out too. So stay tuned and check out the links in the video description for all these parts. It does help us continue to do these videos, and Ronnie will be posting some videos, hopefully getting that trophy. So thank you guys so much for watching, and we love you, and God bless.